Hello everybody. This is going to be your video on tissue layers of the heart. This hopefully will not be that long. What you need to know is short and sweet, but I'm going to be answering some of the questions that you guys have seen in your lab manual and textbook as well. So, your heart is positioned slightly to the left, but, toward the middle of your rib cage. In a middle cavity within your thoracic cavity called the mediastinum, or the middle part, which includes like small pieces of your lungs as well as some important vessels and whatnot. And the heart itself is surrounded by something called the pericardial cavity, right? Objective 2 for your heart objectives is describe all of the layers of membranes associated with the heart. And heart objective 3 is discuss the structure and function of the heart wall layers. So, the short and sweet of what you need to know. There are 3 major layers that we've talked about: the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. Your epicardium can also be called the pericardium. We'll get into some of those details in just a second. And it is the heart's outer covering. Its job is to protect the heart, including from itself. But its job is to protect the heart. Your epicardium, for example, also provides a little bit of fat as backup fuel in the event that you haven't eaten for like 10 hours, but you still need to, run across the parking lot on Black Friday to get to your car. That kind of thing, right? The myocardium is that muscle layer, that middle muscle layer of your lovely heart. So the myocardium, myo means muscle, cardium is heart, so these are your heart muscle layers. The middle layer is muscle, and it's your myocardium. That's all of the muscle. And then you have the endocardium, that inner lining inside your heart. Its job is to be super smooth, because you want blood to flow easily off the sides of it. You don't want a rougher surface where your sticky blood would accidentally get caught and stick to it and cause undue blood clots, right? So your endocardium is the smooth inner surface tissue lining layer of the inside of the heart. And your heart, once again, is found in the pericardial cavity. That is the shortest version of the stuff you need to know. But to answer some of your more in-depth questions and to help alleviate some confusion, your lab manual and some parts of your textbook are super big on using words like visceral and parietal and that sort of thing when they're labeling things. The reason for that is because doctors are normally super specific, as well as the biologists that are dealing with tissue samples and that sort of thing. And different layers, especially different sides of tissue, have different jobs to do. So we label these as different words because of that, right? So your textbook has labeled differently the visceral pericardium, which it also calls the endocardium, and then the serosus pericardium. And you're probably looking at this saying, what the crap, right? Because that can get confusing if these big words don't really make much sense. So the way I like to describe the words visceral and parietal or serous layer, think about a bed sheet, right? Think about the comforter on your bed. When you go to bed at night, there is a side of the big fluffy comforter that you are under that is touching the world outside of your bed. It's the cold side, the side that the fan is directly blowing on. And then the other side of the comforter is the side that you are curled up underneath, that's all warm and smooth and hopefully clean, that you are just happy snuggling up underneath it, right? The parietal layer, or the serous layer, is the outside of that comforter. It is the outer layer where your fan can blow on. It's the outer cooler layer that would face anything else in your body of this tissue layer. whereas the visceral layer of any tissue is the layer of the tissue that touches the organ. So the visceral layer of your bed sheet or your bed comforter is the layer that you are happily curled up underneath, that is warm and like that you are touching, right? This gets kind of complicated with your heart because your epicardium or your pericardium is designed to protect the heart even from itself. So instead of being a made bed, going with my analogy here, instead of being like a made bed where it's just purely straight and simple, you can see like the smooth sheets and whatnot, your pericardium is more like an unmade bed where you haven't made it in a few days or a week. You toss and turn at night and your bed sheets are all tangled up and ruffled. Right? The pericardium you can see on this cross sample here. You see the muscle layer, the myocardium. You can see that inner smooth layer, the endocardium here with your open chamber of the heart. But looking at this outer layer, that epicardium, you can see that not only does the epicardium cover and protect the outer layer of the myocardium, but then it doubles back over and it loops back around the heart. So this is like a super big, super long tangled bed sheet that not only covers the outer layer of the heart directly, but it is folded over a second time, so you have essentially two layers of this epicardium, right? The visceral, like your textbook, when it is referring to the side that is actually touching the heart muscle of this epicardial pericardial layer, that's what it refers to as the epicardium or the visceral pericardium. That's what your lab manual refers to that as. The fibrous pericardium, or the serosal pericardium, parietal layer of the pericardium, whatever you see that you are looking at, is the side that is doubled back over, that was folded over the second time. So it's all the same bed sheet, it's just folded over a few times. The reason why it's folded over a few times is this gives you a double tissue layer of protection for your heart, right? Which, more protection. Awesome. You can't say no to that, especially with an organ as important as your heart. But the second reason is because this creates your pericardial cavity, which is the body cavity where your heart is found, right? Because there's that little airspace between the two where the one sheet is folded over, right? Instead of having air there, you have a little bit of interstitial fluid, just fluid in your body, right? And that is to protect the heart from itself, essentially, right? You know what friction is. Every single one of you right now can sit there and rub your hands together. Your hands are going to start warming up. You can feel that friction, and the harder and faster you rub your hands together, the hotter your hands get, and the more uncomfortable it gets, the more raw you can rub your hands doing that. Some of us have probably felt that uncomfortableness with clothing. We've all had a bad pair of shoes where, as we were walking, the shoes were slightly too tight around part of our foot, so the shoe rubbing on our foot for the entire day of our work rubbed a spot raw. That was because of friction. Nobody likes friction burn. If you were into sports, you probably did some sort of jumping dive and to slide across the grass or the ground or something, and you got a friction burn on your leg because the friction was too fast and you overheated that little area and you burned yourself slightly. For an organ like your heart that beats a minimum of 1 time per second of your life from the second trimester of fetushood to the day you die, you definitely do not want any single part of your heart getting friction burn or anything akin to when you have on a pair of pants that are too tight and your legs have rubbed the pants too hard and now you have an uncomfortable burn on that part of your leg. Your heart wants none of that. Your heart needs none of that. Nobody wants that in their life, right? So you have a little bit of fluid within this pericardial cavity, and as your heart is moving and beating, and these two layers of pericardium rub against each other, that fluid kind of acts as the medium for those friction burns, and it just kind of like mitigates any damage that you could cause yourself by not having that fluid there. And that's the purpose of the pericardium. So not only is that an added layer of protection to prevent you from getting things like infections if you end up with like an infection that leaves your lung or something super bad happens, but also it helps protect your heart from itself as it beats continuously throughout your entire life. It provides a little bit of padding for your heart to stay comfortable as it beats constantly, ka-thunk, 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 for your entire life. Alrighty, guys. I told you this video would be slightly short, but those are two of your objectives for your heart. I'll be back next time where we will start discussing, we will begin discussing the heart valves, because y'all need to understand and know your heart valves. Have a wonderful day, and let me know if you need any help.